Hello and welcome to the debate. I'm your host Sana Makbool with you at B2B World. In today's show, of course, we'll be taking a look at the flood situation and give you the updates regarding the rescue and relief operations that are currently underway. Of course, more than 33 million people have so far been affected, with the death toll that keeps on rising. The latest death toll is more than about 1,200 people who have lost their lives. We have about 4,000 people who have been injured since June 14th. Thousands of homes have been destroyed. Millions of people have been rendered homeless. We also know that thousands of acres of cultivated land and crops have also been washed away. Increasingly, we have seen that livestock and cattle are also being washed away, which is, of course, a primary source of income for most people. There are waterborne diseases that are also surfacing and coming in and affecting the needs of the people. And then we also, of course, see that the continuing increase in the suffering of the people is adding to more misery when we talk about the rescue and relief operations not being able to reach far-flung areas. This, of course, has been a problem with more rain in the forecast as well. There have been increasing water levels from the various areas that have affected other parts of the country as well, rather than when we take a look at the main provinces which have been affected, which is Balochistan and then interior and then, of course, South Punjab. There are numerous activities going on from various authorities within the country. Of course, international appeals have also been put forward. A flood response plan was also launched yesterday in Islamabad and Geneva, and an appeal by the United Nations of $160.3 million has also been put forward. There are other international donors and countries coming in and contributing in terms of aid, but of course the kind of suffering that we see and the kind of assessment that we're making seems to be rising. And there's, of course, talk of how the efforts and resources required to be able to come out of this crisis is going to take a very, very long time. We're going to be talking about the recent updates regarding this and what needs to be done. And all of this, we've, of course, taken a look at the kind of environmental changes that have contributed to this. Also taken in a look at the debate between whether or not this was a man-made or a natural disaster. But at the moment, when we talk about the kind of needs that are required by the people, there are many that are being ignored. The diseases and waterborne problems are, of course, one aspect of it, which we also saw earlier today, an article that was given in considering the various factors, and particularly the marginalized population, including women and children who have special needs, continue to be affected. We have also seen that when we talk about the requirements, there are various and multiple actions taking place without much coordination that is, of course, needed. So we're going to be taking a look at that as well, getting an update regarding what can be done in terms of assessing the needs of the people, planning for them moving forward, and then also consequently taking a look at the longer term measures that are required, particularly in terms of food security, rehabilitation, and bringing people along with the kind of problems that they have in terms of making them sustainable. This is, of course, going to be the focus of our show today. And always in the studios, I've been joined by Farrukh Batafi, senior analyst, and we've been joined in the studios today as well by a very special guest, CEO Jazz, Mr. Amir Ibrahim is also with us in the studios. Thank you, Amir, for being with us. We have also been joined by two guests online. Bushra Manur, a women rights activist, has joined us online. We've also been joined by Mushtaq Yousafzai, who's a senior journalist from KP. Thank you very much, everyone, for being a part of the debate today. Let me start with you, Mushtaq Sab. When we take a look at the situation, of course, we're trying to get in updates from various parts of the country and trying to understand what is going on at the moment. We keep on hearing more and more information coming in, but when we take a look at the kind of situation and the kinds of needs that exist currently, we still want more access to the kind of things that are going on at the moment on ground. Can you give us an idea of what is going on in KP at the moment and what seem to be the major areas which are currently affected and need of help?
Thank you so much. Actually, parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa started suffering from floods and heavy rain since June 15. And southern parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Lucky Marwar, Dera Ismail Khan, Bannu, and Tang, they were suffered badly in June because there were heavy rain and floods in that region. And still they're suffering because most of the villages and towns are underwater. But recently there was a heavy rain that flooded the river Swat, and the rain started in last Friday, and it was unusual rain because people in that area told us that they never saw such heavy rain. And then it flooded river Swat, and the authorities in downtown were aware that the impact will come on the downtown like Charsadda, Nowshera, because these areas, some of the villages and people are living just along River Kabul, and that River Swadhan flooded River Kabul. And it was Friday, I think August 26, when the local administration in Charsadda, Peshawar, and Nowshera started warning people that they should ship to safer places. But I visited yesterday some parts of Charsadda and Nowshera, and people who suffered losses, they lost everything in the floods, and they told us that yes, we were informed quite before of the flood, but we didn't believe because we thought that the weather is quite clear, not raining there, so this not possible that the flood will hit us. And they were asleep. Most of the people were sleeping on the night between 26 and 27 when
Right.
flood water entered their villages. So right now
Yusuf
we
Zaisab,
have issues.
can you clarify one important point, because we keep on hearing the reports that maybe there are parts which are not still accessible and that people cannot be rescued. Do you think that all parts are now accessible and people have been rescued from there, sir?
There are certain places in southern district and northern areas, upper
Yeah.
Kohistan, upper Dir, and Kalam, because Kalam is a very tourist spot, and around 4,000 tourists from all over Pakistan stranded there. And it's the Kalam and its adjoining villages, Mataltan, Gabra, there are small villages. So it's only 40,000 population. And
Right, absolutely. And when we talk about issues of accessibility and being connected, of course, this was something that came to the forefront in a lot of areas which we were not able to reach in terms of urgent rescue and relief efforts was due to the lack of communication. We had bridges collapsing. We had other areas also losing connectivity in terms of any communication at all, particularly parts of Balochistan and Quetta. Amir, when we look at the situation and the issues of communication and the importance that it rises to in terms of especially such issues of natural disasters or calamities where people are in urgent need of help and we need to be able to connect with them. What sort of measures do you think can be taken in terms of providing those urgent needs? And also when we take a look in retrospective, the way that things have evolved, it has happened in the past as well. It happened in 2010 as well. And we almost every year predict that we will be in a flood-like situation. So when we talk about such issues, what can be done or be put in place to be able to minimize this impact?
And Amir Saab, since we are talking about networking and we are talking about the capacity of people to communicate, could you also talk about the integrity of our communication infrastructure? Because 1/3 of the country is underwater. So what becomes of all those towers and communication infrastructure, sir?
Right. Thank you for asking. And we've been highlighting the importance of communications and telecom infrastructure as an integral part of the overall infrastructure of a country. So infrastructure is not just roads and hospitals and schools, but also digital connectivity, fiber, towers, and we've made a lot of progress in Pakistan in terms of connecting the far-flung areas through our services. And I speak now as an industry, not specifically as Jazz. I think collectively we cover more or less 88-89% of the population of the country. Now, what we have seen in the floods, and you've been covering it very well, these have been unprecedented. They have damaged not only our infrastructure, but about 30,000 roads, 150 bridges. And when we have to connect, the nature of our business is such that we are connected either through fiber, which is a glass pipe that goes across in the country, and then through towers, which are then emitting signals through their wireless radios. Now, when there is unprecedented rains like this, and the equipment is submerged, obviously the equipment also malfunctions, and there have been numerous cases of damage. So at our peak, and here I talk only about Jazz, about 1,000 of our cell sites were down out of a total of about 15,000.
Right.
So that just gives you a scale. But alarmingly, all of Quetta was down because the fiber that was going into Balochistan and the bridges along with which the fiber was laid, those bridges were broken. So it took us about 2-3 days before we could patch that. And again, we faced the same challenges as anybody else would have failed in their rescue and relief efforts, because you can't get to a point if there are no roads. So our rescue teams, our technical teams, face the same challenges. Again, we do recognize that in times like this, sending an SOS signal is extremely important to be able to identify people, for them to send signals to their loved ones, to any emergency hotline. And that's why we have been highlighting the need for telecommunication services to be considered not only as essential services, but as emergency services.
Right. So, Amir, considering the fact that all of this did happen and there were issues in communication, what do you think could have been done about it, or what did Jazz in fact do about it? And when we talk about the telecom industry in general, what sort of measures can other industries also take?
Right. So, listen, we have to be mindful of a few things. There are, while we are looking at fixing some things could have been fixed, some things cannot be fixed.
Okay.
So, telecommunication towers, they rely on energization. We need electricity. If there is no electricity, we have battery backups. The third source of power for us are generators, which then run on diesel fuel. So, if there is no electricity in an area, if the batteries have been submerged, they have a certain life, which is typically around 2 hours. And then the third source of power is actually the generator. So if all of those three things have been exhausted, it is but natural that the communication will disappear. Unfortunately, in that context, not a whole lot more can be done. With regards to fiberization, we can perhaps create more redundancy going into certain areas so that we don't see a situation like we experienced in Quetta. Recently.
Absolutely. Another very important aspect regarding the flood relief activities and the kinds of problems that people have been facing are, as I mentioned earlier, the needs of marginalized people and of special communities such as, of course, disabled people, elderly, women and children. And Bushra, your efforts in this regard, of course, are commendable, and there is a lot that has been going on in terms of the way that these issues have been highlighted, which is problematic in terms of how they have actually not been talked about as much as they need to. Of course, I understand the taboo around such topics, but the fact remains that women's health is a concern and it needs to come to the forefront as well. Can you update us regarding the efforts that you have put up in this regard and the kinds of issues and challenges that women currently are facing in the aftermath of these floods?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very glad to be here. I'm basically a student and I'm running this campaign along with another friend, Anam Khalid, which is called Mahwari Justice. Mahwari is an Urdu word for menstruation. Mahwari Justice is a campaign that we started when the floods first hit areas of Qila Saifullah. At that time, only there were some areas of Balochistan had flooded. Me and my friend realized this need that a lot of women are going to be neglected. They're going to be neglected by the government. They're going to be neglected by the relief campaigners, and their needs are going to be ignored. So what we started doing is that we started collecting supplies, sanitary supplies for the women in flood-affected areas. Mahwari Justice is a campaign that is providing menstrual relief kits to the women. So each kit contains a pack of sanitary pads. So we pack these pads alongside a bar of soap, and we also have a panty. So this is how our basic kit works, and we have been collecting the supplies, and we started this campaign through Twitter. We made a Twitter handle with the name of Mahwari, and I gave my account number, Anand gave her EasyPass and Jakesh account. We made short videos urging how important this need is, and also we have gotten a lot of backlash in terms of the work that we have been doing, and people have been saying that menstrual relief is not a current need because
a priority. Yes.
People,
right, Bushra, could you also actually talk about how the media is covering the crisis? Because we have seen that it took BBC to actually speak about needs of women in these crisis hit areas. We haven't seen the mainstream media actually picking up on these matters, perhaps because of the element of shame or perhaps because of our traditional, filters that are there in the society. Are you satisfied with the way it was covered and it is being covered right now?
And also add to that, considering the fact that all of these factors exist, you were earlier telling us about the kit that you're providing to people. Of course, we've seen within our own country resistance towards even polio vaccinations and other campaigns as well. And I want to understand whether or not such factors are taken into account, whether or not women themselves will be welcoming of such measures, will be able to understand this, will be able to have the support that they require. Is that part of your campaign as well, along with the kit that you're distributing?
Yes, we are actually catering to that needs as well. I have a flyer with me. Flyer tells us about it is a pictorial representation of how to use a sanitary pad. We have been packing such flyers alongside these kits. So in order to tell the women how, if the women do not know how to use it, because I believe that women can adapt to anything. Urban women have been using sanitary pads for ages, and then why do urban women think that rural women cannot adapt to it? But yes, we have been receiving a lot of calls from the people in the flood affected areas. They have been saying that women are using tree leaves. They have been saying that women are using rags, and the same rags are being shared by multiple women in the same house because they do not have supplies. So that is why we are providing to these women, and there are a lot of women who are actively demanding sanitary pads. But also, we are also in the process of making cloth pads. We are procuring cotton waste from the factories. We have been trying to reach out to a lot of textile factories. Some of them responded, and what we are receiving is textile waste. We're going to pass it along with a bar of soap and then an underwear to supply to flood affected areas. Another thing is that when we started this campaign, there was, yes, I do agree to the part that there was a lot of backlash that we were facing. There was a lot of, because menstruation is such a taboo topic, there was a lot of backlash from our families as well. My family is not supportive of the work I'm doing. They think it is such a shameless thing to do, talk about menstruation so openly. I have been explaining to the people online and offline that it is an important need and women cannot be neglected. What we are doing is that we are sending these kids to doctors who are arranging medical camps in the flood affected areas. And so if the doctors do instruct the women on how to use them. And also, the doctors have been telling that the women have very bad UTIs, they have yeast infections, and these are the things that they're struggling with. They're in need of a safe way to manage their period.
Absolutely, and it is indeed unfortunate, Bushra, that you're facing that kind of backlash, of course. But there are also other needs that currently exist in terms of what women are facing that I would like to talk more about. But I'll come back to you, Mr. Mushtaq Yousafzai. When we talk about these issues and the kind of resistance that Bushra was earlier mentioning, how do you think that the efforts that two students are doing at the moment can be incorporated in the activities giving in from the authorities that are going on right now? And when we talk about relief and rescue activities in general as well, we've been seeing quite a few issues in terms of how these efforts are coordinated. There are multiple channels, individuals, organizations, bodies, bank accounts that are currently underway, and all of this is happening in a manner which seems to not be as coordinated as it should be. And then we're also seeing video footage of ration bags, flour bags being thrown off the helicopters, which is absolutely useless. I mean, this is information that is quite obvious. This is not of use to the people who are sitting down below, who are expecting relief and aid. And what's being given to them are bags that are just exploding on the ground when they also don't have facilities to cook food. So what would you like to say about the current relief efforts that are going on, and whether or not such relief activities, particularly in KP, or if other areas you can also update regarding that, need to have better actions and better measurements in place, and especially also incorporating what Bushra said earlier?
Well, there is no coordination between the provincial government and the federal government. And you know, the provincial government is having quite limited resources. We have only one helicopter, and that is meant for the chief minister. The chief minister has surrendered his own helicopter to bring people from Kalam. As I mentioned, there are 4,000 tourists stuck there and 40,000 people. So that one helicopter is to provide food and bring people to downtown in Swat. And I visited some of the flood affected areas yesterday. And you know, women and children are always neglected. And I saw it's quite hard, quite humid these days in parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And some of the women were sitting inside the tents. And it was unbearable. You know, this was so much hard. And the women told me that when the Prime Minister was visiting that camp in Charsadda, the local authorities arranged them pedestal fans, and they installed each fan to each tent. But the moment the Prime Minister left that sports complex where they accommodated these families, all these fans were just seized, and they were taken back from where they took to that camp. So women are only neglected, and then women are supposed to provide drinking water. And I saw in these areas, Nashera and Charsadda, we drink actually water from wells. and all these wells are just filled by flood water. So drinking water is a very major issue in this area. And then I saw a number of people were suffering from eye and skin infection, and diarrhea was quite common in those areas. So there are multiple issues, but luckily we have some good people, and I saw a number of people. They were providing cooked rice and drinking water from Peshawar, Mardan, and other places. But I couldn't see major contribution from uh, philanthropists because the federal government has banned most of the non-governmental organization to work in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa quite earlier. So that's another major challenge that people can't come to facilitate these people in these.
Right, absolutely. Amir, when we talk about issues ranging from any and everything within the country and the world, there's a lot of emphasis in terms of innovative ideas, technological solutions. There are startups emerging, and Pakistan has seen quite an exponential growth in that regard. And we've seen the private sector also focusing a lot on the entrepreneurial ecosystem as well. And Jazz itself also does put emphasis on that. But when we talk about such issues that what we're facing at the moment, is there any way that we can also involve our entrepreneurs or our startup community in terms of finding solutions to issues which are currently in need of Pakistan, and not just in terms of disasters like these and in the aftermath of such calamities, but at the same time, while there is no flood, we are still facing issues of climate change. It's still going on, and there are concerns that already exist. How can we involve more and more people within this community to come up with solutions and ideas and to provide technological help to the people?
And if we can, why haven't we done it yet?
Okay. Right, we can always look at what more could we have done, but I think there's a budding ecosystem of startups in Pakistan. They identify opportunities and they fill the gap. And you're like, so whether it's a commercial initiative or whether it's a healthcare initiative, I think the whole idea is that we create the enabling environment where there are people who are committed to finding a solution to a certain problem, have the means and ability to be able to do that. And not every startup idea should be a commercial one. I know that only today we were discussing with the team from NUST on what can be done in terms of creating an emergency response app over here. Now, a lot of these things cannot be predicted. There will be different responses to different calamities and crises at different stages, and an app that worked 2 years ago for COVID may not be the right one today. But what we need to ensure is that there is enough creativity and the tool kits available for people to be able to develop those things. And I think that's one area where Pakistan has made a lot of progress. Like I said, there is a budding ecosystem of startups who are at this stage perhaps over-indexing their solutions towards fintech, but there are also other areas where they're actually working on. So we as an enabler, which is an important part of what we do, is to enable the ecosystem through the prevalence of broadband, long, wide and robust in Pakistan, and also the prevalence of smartphones. That is where the ecosystem can actually be built and the solutions can eventually be provided.
Right. And Amir Saab, I understand that you are saying you are right in saying that we cannot actually predict all this. But let's face it, Pakistan has actually seen an earthquake which was earth-shattering, right? In 2005. In 2010, we saw similar kind of inundation and flood as well. One would have thought that by now, naturally, because usually business actually works in organic way, that there would be some kind of precautions or some kind of apps already available. Unfortunately, it seems that the moment these calamities unfold, hardly anything appears to be in front of us. Why would that be?
So I think it's perhaps putting too much burden on apps which could have either averted or helped in the rescue of what we've seen. So there are certain responsibilities for national disaster management, prevention, floods. Those are not my areas of expertise. But I think that's where we need to put more of our energy in terms of, if the floods happened 12 years ago, what have we learned and done differently now? Now, I can tell you that when COVID happened, had there been no smartphones and a broadband infrastructure, we would have been much worse off. Now, in 2010, there weren't as many smartphones. In 2005 earthquake, there wasn't even 3G and 4G in Pakistan. So some of these things will be technological with the evolution of time. And certainly, like I said, there will be committed individuals who will come up with some of these solutions. But we have to differentiate what the role of public sector is, what the role of the nation and the state is, and what can we expect from the startup community. So I think what we can do at bare minimum is to ensure that telecommunication services are considered not only as essential, but emergency services, and they should be treated as such. Because what we have seen time and time again is when things like this happen, disasters like these happen, we rely on communication a whole lot more. And unfortunately, the mindset here in this country still is at times painfully regressive, where we think that smartphones are a luxury tool, or this is a thing that can be shut off whenever we want to. This is an essential part of our future infrastructure, and we must protect it as such. We must build it as such.
Right, and of course, when we talk about certain committed individuals, we have one certain individual with us as well who has actually stepped up and done something about what is going on and the kinds of problems that people are facing. Bushra, it's unfortunate that there's also other crises that women are facing at the moment. There is, of course, issues of gender-based violence that currently exist. There are estimations made of how there is an increase in that. We also had a very unfortunate incident being reported earlier today where a flood victim was drugged and was sexually abused. And of course, we have such incidents coming in and sometimes we also, of course, see that it is quite often that when we take a look at such disasters, these incidents always spring up. And then we don't have the kind of protection mechanisms for our women. They are already quite shaky. And then when we talk about the issues of a natural disaster, they are, of course, increased as well. Is there anything that your efforts or people who are contributing towards women needs is doing about that?
I agree with the fact that it is actually the women who have to face the brunt of such crises, and in a patriarchal society like us, it is the women who are affected the most and their needs are neglected. Yes, there are a lot of things that are happening which are extremely unfortunate for the women. The rise in the gender-based violence and domestic abuse, these numbers are horrifying. We are basically concerned towards providing the menstrual relief for the women because we're just two students who started this campaign. We tried reaching out to a lot of experts in Pakistan who are working for the menstrual relief. We tried reaching out to a lot of organizations who are working for the reproductive health of women, but we did not get any response. They were not willing to cooperate, or they would tell us that their work is limited to awareness-based with these sessions. So we have been trying our best to give some impact, and also this kind of work that we are doing, it does get a lot of backlash because of the fact that it's very controversial because people in Pakistan do not like to talk about periods. I come from a family of 5 sisters. We have 5 sisters in our home, and even despite that fact, we cannot talk about periods openly. So I do understand the cultural barriers that we are facing with, but this campaign has stirred up a debate, which is, I think it is good because we needed to have that. People are actually providing sanitary supplies to the women in such affected areas. Yesterday, I received a call from the vendor in Chalmi from whom I have been collecting these panties. And he told me that a lot of people have been coming lately to get menstrual supplies at the flood-affected areas. I think this is the impact this campaign is producing. People are okay. People are trying to be comfortable to talk about menstruation openly. And but we have currently provided to 8,000 women in several areas of Balochistan, including Lasbela, Uthal, several areas of interior Sindh as well, and Saraiki was saved too. We're in the process of reaching out to the people in KP, but of course, as I said, we have very limited resources. It's just a group of students who have been running this campaign via Twitter, and have been receiving a lot of backlash for the work that we have been doing, not only from the people who dismiss menstrual hygiene as a genuine issue, but also from the people who think that there are some other needs that are more important. I have been writing from the very
absolutely, and this is something I want to talk more about in terms of when we talk about the issues and needs of people. There seems to be a categorization of what is needed more urgently and what is a priority at the moment, and understand that of course exists. But Farooq, when we talk about this distinction and the hierarchy, so to speak, then there's of course efforts that are underway that are needed and require our immediate response, such as saving people's lives. But then of course there are issues that that people are currently facing. And it's not just women, it's also the sick, it's also children, it's also the elderly, and there's so many other people and different areas in which people are suffering. When we talk about the kind of response measures that exist and the kind of plan that exists, is there a way that we are able to cater to the needs of all the urgent ones as well, and the ones that seem to be not a priority at the moment? Because when we talk about such needs, there's the kind of backlash that Bushra Adia was talking about, which goes to say that this is not something which is important right now.
Right, and Sana, that's why my earlier question to Bushra was basically me putting my own profession on the mat. 50 plus channels, so many newspapers, and it takes a foreign outlet to actually highlight that there are women also and they have needs as well. Why is it that our media is mum when it comes to the mortal realities on ground of all these people? This is the first thing that one has to look at. Then, of course, there are needs. For example, first of all, it is a rescue, relief, and survival, because people have lost so much at this moment that they will be needing some kind of intervention. Governments are doing their job. You mentioned the example of Balochistan, where flour bags were being thrown or chucked out of the helicopters, and we saw that the moment they would hit the ground, they would scatter. And there was hardly anything anybody could do about this. So there are problems regarding the distribution mechanism as well. Why not prepare something, because you have the luxury of being on the dry land and then actually distribute it? And why can't you actually bring the helicopter down for a bit and distribute it among people, right? But frankly, when you look at the way things are going on, and this is my concern earlier to Amir Saab as well, and I highlighted earlier, that it is not as if we don't have infrastructure or SOPs or data for these matters. But the problem is the moment crisis strikes, all these things actually disappear. Somehow it seems that all the SOPs that were there, that were supposed to be there, the government, the media and the entrepreneurs, they were to actually focus on those things, they disappear. So at this moment, my concern is that immediate is survival, and then some kind of solution to immediate needs. In the medium term, of course, we have to go for the issue of accountability as well, and to improve the channels and everything. In the long term, then we can talk about climate change and all those problems. Right now, you don't have the luxury of time to look back and see what exactly happened. Right now, you have to help people survive. And finally, one word regarding that horrible incident you mentioned about that girl being taken advantage of. This is shameful. I think if we keep on saying that we are so civilized that we allow for shame in our communication and to filter our communication, then at least we should be taking such people to task who are actually brutes in human skin.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Yousafzai, when we talk about the current crisis, there's also the looming crisis in terms of food security issues. Of course, there are thousands of acres of cultivated land and crop that has been washed away, and there is already shortage of certain food items, including wheat, particularly in GB and other parts. And there's, of course, also the issue of tomatoes and onions, and the prices have also skyrocketed since the crops have been washed away. When we take a look at this particular issue, especially in terms of what is going on in the flood hit areas, what sort of access do you think that people need to have in terms of the future needs as well, and whether or not the authorities and current efforts are taking into account what's going to eventually be the problem in a couple of months?
Yes, actually, in most of these areas, when I met the people, they were fed up of eating rice because they are given packed rice. So now the people were demanding ration, and they wanted to have some edibles items because everything just damaged in the floods. So the prices went up for some time, but now when roads and bridges are linking again, because we are getting vegetables from Afghanistan, we are getting fruit from Afghanistan. So now yesterday and today, the market was full of these items, and prices were stable. Like Karachi, I think the prices are very high, but the potato price, tomato and onion, it's quite reasonable in parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. But yes, the crops are damaged in Charsadda, in Naushera, and in Upper Dir and Lower Dir and Upper Kohistan and Swat. And some orchards were damaged. But, there is no assessment because the government is not able to start assessment and tell us about the damages suffered by the government, the state, and individual. So it will take some time.
Right. Once again, Yusuf Zai Saab, I need a little bit of clarification regarding disaster plan. We have seen some horrendous episodes, like those 5 brothers who were stranded on a patch of land and they were swept away. And then we have seen this issue of distribution as well. When we talk about my profession, your profession, that is journalism, in coverages, we have been using drones for quite some time. Are you telling me that in none of the disaster management plans we had any provision for any drones at all, so that people could be provided any kind of solutions immediately when they are stranded or they are not accessible through land?
Actually, we are very unfortunate people, and we forget when the disaster is over. And I remember in 2010, there was huge losses in parts of Upper Swat, particularly in Kalam. And the local authorities, the government is quite weak that people were encroaching River Swat. And it's because of these encroachments in Kalam in Bahrain, because there's a river and we encroached the river. We started building hotels and apartments, and it was because of these encroachments that when the flood came in the river, it just swept away each and everything. And I have seen 2 years ago the Commissioner Malakand wanted to demolish some of the buildings and hotels because they were built on state land and inside the river. But those owners, they were quite powerful, and they just transferred the commissioner when he served notices on them within 1 week. So these are mafias, and they are very, very, very strong. Imagine they just transferred the commissioner in 1 week because he was going to take action against timber mafia, those people who were encroaching state land and they were building in the river.
Right, absolutely. Mr. Ahmed, when we talk about the kinds of responsibilities and responses that exist, you earlier were talking about how the public sector needs to respond in its own way. And then there's, of course, the private sector, the entrepreneurial community, and the corporate sector as well. There are, of course, issues of social responsibility that exist, and there are organizations that can help in their own capacities as well. When we talk about such CSR initiatives, what do you think that the different corporate sector industries that we have can do? And when we talk about what is happening at the moment, what is Jazz contributing, and also in looking forward, what would you like to see other countries also taking in from their CSR initiatives?
Sure. Before I address that, I'd like to perhaps go back to the point Farrukh made about, like the brutes and the animals in Pakistan. But for each one of them, there are probably 100 heroes also that we need to think about. People like all the volunteers that we have. We have Bushra on the call right now. They're doing incredible work. So I think times like this, not only is our speed important, but I think our positivity and our optimism is also important. And I think my experience, both in COVID, previous floods, has been that Pakistanis are extremely generous and they've got a huge heart. They want to help. Perhaps we don't have the best skills for operations management, crisis management, but when a crisis does arrive, I think they go out of their way to help. And yes, of course, there will be bad incidents, some wheat being thrown out, or these bags being thrown out of a helicopter, isolated incidents here and there. And we should call such incidents out and the people who perpetrate them. But at the same time, we must be positive during this particular time. I don't think it's either the time for politicization or negativity. Now, let me get back to CSR and what we can do as organizations. So Jazz has been at the forefront of leading such initiatives. And ordinarily, you say that, like Neki Kar Darya Mein Dal, but at times like this, you perhaps want to highlight these things because it becomes an element of other people emulating that. And in that context, we did make a pledge 3-4 days ago that we would contribute about 1 billion rupees And that came from multiple angles, and I can talk first about ourselves and then hopefully how other companies can do. Rescue work is not our competency. So, like we talked about, this is essential services. We can provide those essential services to people right now who do not have the ability to make calls. So we have made calls free, and about 30% of our network, close to about 9 million people, have already availed those free calls. And we are running it on an ongoing basis. So that's the first thing, because then they can actually reach out to somebody, identify their location, identify their problem, etc., etc. So communication, the importance of communication, and even at a time when people cannot afford it, they do not have the balance in their phones, we have made sure that people who have a zero balance or who ordinarily, there is nowhere to actually go and buy a top-up. So we have made those calls free. Then we are also going to contribute towards tents, food, medicines, and all those things. Again, like I said, these are the things that corporations can do. It's not our competency to be on the ground. Actually, it becomes counterproductive. As much as my employees would like to be out there with our brothers and sisters, I have asked them to refrain till the time that the roads are clear. It's their own safety which is important, and rather than helping, they could actually become another person or another vehicle that has to be rescued. So what we can do right now is to collect funds, and I hope that other corporations in Pakistan would follow suit, that they will do what we have done, and they would encourage others to do so also.
Right, it is heartening to hear your contributions, and nobody is actually asking, particularly your company or the telecommunication organizations, to actually go in the field, but there are others who have the expertise, right? So the government of Pakistan, I keep on hearing the Prime Minister talk about this as well, and others, that perhaps all of us actually have to go for, and I'm totally with you when you talk about tribalism, right? It is no time for tribalism, and the Prime Minister keeps on saying, other ministers also say, that we have to have a whole of nation approach to this, right? So that's why we keep on highlighting the negativities as well. But of course, Pakistan is a great nation which has repeatedly, like a phoenix, risen from ashes. So I'm sure that your contribution will go a long way to bring us on our feet.
Absolutely, and there are numerous unsung heroes that are contributing as well, and we have seen quite a few footages and examples coming in as well, people even sharing ration bags when they don't even have enough food for themselves. So it's of course wonderful to see that there are people actually on ground who are doing so much in their own individual capacity, which makes us all want to do so much better. Bushra, I just have time for one short question from you. When we take a look at your efforts, of course they're entirely commendable, but we also want to be able to see how we can support, because you keep mentioning the kind of backlash that you're facing both at home and in terms of the society. We want to be able to ask you, who do you require help from, who all can contribute, and what sort of organizations do you think can also step forward to support your cause? Bushra, can you please unmute yourself? We can't hear you.
Yes, we are in dire need of help. We need help from the sanitary napkin companies. We need help to donate some supplies to us, because when we reached out to a very big brand in Pakistan, they only donated us 150 bags. We single-handedly have reached out to 8,000 women, supplied them with the kits, but these companies are not willing to cooperate with us. And we do need support. We do need support in the form of funds. We do need support in the form of, if we would like people who are in the textile company to connect with us so that we can make cotton pads and reach out to the women. Another support that we are in dire need of is the support in transportation. People have been reaching out from very different parts of the country, but we do not have the means and resources to reach out to them. So if somebody can give us support in that capacity, it would be wonderful. We have our Twitter handle with the name of Mahwari Justice, and you can also reach out to me or my partner Anam Khalid, who has been working on this campaign alongside me.
Right, thank you very much, Bushra Manur, and of course through our channel we would be able to help you and contribute to your cause as much as we can. So we would love to be able to talk more about that, but thank you so much for your efforts, and we really hope that you're able to achieve so much more. Thank you very much, Mr. Mushtaq Yousafzai, for being a part of the debate, and of course Mr. Amir Ibrahim for joining us in the studios and contributing towards the cause, and of course the people who are currently suffering and helping in your own capacity. And Farooq, always a pleasure to have you on the show. Thank you very much. That's all we have from the debate. We'll keep updating you regarding what is going on in the flood situation, and of course the relief and rescue efforts that are currently underway and the kind of help that people need. So keep contributing as much as you can. That's all that we have from the debate. We'll see you tomorrow.